Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Boak, Chairman of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. This is a virtual planning board meeting. We're having the Zoom conference format. The agenda is on the town's website, has information needed to participate in Zoom in the Zoom format or by telephone. If you wish to join by Zoom, it's 928-9366-3580. You can also dial in at area code 929-205-6099 and then enter that same thing. If you are conferencing in by phone or by Zoom and are watching on cable TV or YouTube, you have to turn your volume or we'll get feedback. You can always watch this on channel 1301 or stream on YouTube or Kennebunkport television. During the meeting, only the planning board and the current participant are selected to be on screen with audio connected. Other participants will be blacked out, audio muted, except when the board solicited public input. If we are in a point of a public meeting, please feel free to raise your hand, virtual hand, in order to be recognized. Appreciate your support and patience with this new plan. I'm going to now take roll officially, and you'll have to respond, please. Okay, Nina?
Here.
Scott? You'll have to unmute before you say here. No, you're not. We're not hearing you, Scott. We'll get back to you. Ed?
Here.
Larry?
Here.
George?
Here.
And John?
Here.
And Scott is unmuted, so he's here. Okay, we're good. All right, first order of business is the approval of minutes from the last meeting. So is everybody taking a look at those?
Yes.
Yes.
Any comments or motions or anything?
Motion to approve them.
Well, I had an edit.
Did you provide it to Trish?
I did send it to Trish. You mean to read it?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So it's with regard to, let me see, it's on page, it's on the second page, I guess, second of three. Yep, second page. And it's on section 3 with regard to 35 Langsford Road. And it's paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Paragraph 12. It starts out, Mrs. Perlmutter asked if the applicant could confirm the elevation. Okay, and then the information got a little too short for clarity. So I restated this to say that Mrs. Perlmutter asked if the applicant could confirm the elevation of the top of the subfloor or the first floor of the new house, or that the elevation is located at 14.25 feet. Mr. Bedell replied that the new building will be constructed on piers and will be elevated as required above the base 12-foot 0-inch elevation of the flood zone.
Is that exactly what I asked, though?
I think so. I think so. The original version was a little too short. Let me read you the original version of this. So I got it right here. Hang on. So the original version is, okay, Mrs. Perlmutter asked if the applicant could confirm the elevation is at 4.8 period. Okay, full stop. So, I mean, 4.8 is below the flood level, right? I don't know. So I don't know.
I think I asked whether it was 4 feet above the flood level.
Yes.
Okay, well, okay, so then let me continue. Mr. Bedell replied the building will be constructed on piers, will be elevated as required by the flood zone. Mrs. Perlmutter then asked if there will be a silt fencing. Okay, that was another pair. I just said, yeah, the silt fencing is, I didn't change any of that. So So what I'm hearing from Nina is that my suggested change should be changed to Mrs. Perlmutter asked if the applicant confirmed the elevation is at 4 feet above flood level. Is that correct?
Yes, except it's Ms. Perlmutter.
Miss Perlmutter, sorry, Miss Perlmutter, okay. All right,
I keep looking over my shoulder for my mother.
I got you, okay. Okay, sorry. Sorry, Ms. Perlmutter asked if the applicant confirmed the elevation of the subfloor, because that was really the reference on the drawings, is at 4 feet above the flood zone. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. So I should modify my modification to reflect that.
And send your modification to Trish so she gets it right in the minutes.
Oh, okay, I'll do that, yeah.
So just to point out that what we want Trish to do is to make sure that she has captured the minutes of the meeting correctly.
Yes, correct,
We're not in a position to amend what we should have said or thought we said.
correct,
right, right.
correct,
Okay.
absolutely correct.
Okay. Anyway, there is actually a motion on the floor, but
I'll
maybe
second it as amended.
okay. So we have a motion made and seconded. So I'm in favor. And Nina,
In favor.
Scott,
In favor.
Ed,
Yes.
and Larry.
Yes,
Okay. So the minutes are approved. All righty. That moves on to the first agenda item. And so the first agenda item is 200501, Lauren and Ken Handler, Graham Architects Authorized Agents, to demolish an existing residence and rebuild in a different location to the greatest extent possible within setbacks. Seasonal bunkhouse will be removed. This is 45 Langsford Road. So now we will ask to get Mr. Graham ahead. This is a continued public hearing on this item. So we first have Mr. Graham come on and give us a brief update or brief description of this particular project. So can you promote Mr. Graham to a panelist, please?
Oh, I think I have to share my video. I think this happened last time. There we go.
There he is. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As mentioned, for the record, my name is David Graham, and I'm the agent for the handlers for this project. I'm just going to share my screen. I need to share my screen in the host disabled screen sharing.
David, can you help him out there?
Oh, there we go. Okay. We are on. Just have to find it now. Hold on 1 second. Just had it open. Don't know what happened to it. And where? Okay. There's. Okay, does everybody see the site plan? Okay.
Yep.
So yes, as mentioned, the project encompasses consolidating a number of buildings on the site into a single-family residence along Langsford Road. And as mentioned, we've located it to the greatest possible extent within the property line setbacks as well as far back from the resource. And essentially that's the project. There is, the last time we talked, there is a sewer easement on the property. The pump station, that's going to be removed, and the homeowner will take ownership of that, and it will be relocated adjacent to the proposed building site. And does anyone have any questions? I don't think we had anything from the last meeting. We were just continuing the.
No, and the new square footage is 17.9%, it says, and the volume is 21% bigger, so it's within the 30% in both cases.
That's correct.
Okay. So does anybody have any anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Graham at this point?
No? Pretty clear.
So I guess we can unshare the screen.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't have any problems with this one either. So I guess if someone would like to make a motion on this, Larry?
So
Do we
I make a
need-
motion.
Do we need to close the public hearing?
Yes, we do. Thank you. We need to well, I need to open it first. I wanted to see if they had any problems. First the
Okay.
board goes, then the public, then we
Okay.
come back to the board. I'm sorry, I did it in the wrong order. But, okay, hearing nothing from the board, I will now request that any member of the public who wishes to speak on this particular item at 45 Langsford Road, please raise your digital hand so that, okay.
Yeah, this is Bruce Jordan, Kathy's husband. She's right here as well. We just had a couple of questions. Can you guys hear me?
Okay, identify your address just for the record, please.
33 Langsford, right next to it.
So proceed with your questions.
So when you said the design is going to do its best to honor the 15-foot setback, as we looked at that, it seems to me, I mean, I'm not an architect, but that it's not staying to that 15-foot setback. So just so you know, we'd ask Brian if you wouldn't mind just staking where the house is going to be so we can like visually just see it. First of all, we don't have any problem with them doing it. It's their property, obviously, if they want to do it. We don't have any issues with any of that. We just wanted to get a feel for whether or not that design is honoring the 15-foot setback. We can't get a good sense of it.
I believe your questions are actually going to be for the third application, which is for 35 Langsford Road. The Spinard, Michael Spinard and Brian Glazer.
Oh, I thought that's who we were talking about.
This is 45.
Oh,
45 Road.
I have no questions about that.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Anyone else?
You can, yeah, I'll lower my hand here,
Thank you.
or you can do it for me, right?
So, are there any other hands being raised? Hearing nothing, I'm going to close. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on number 45, Langsford Road. And now, are there any more questions from the board, or any more things for the board? Then I guess I'll take a motion at this point. I think I have the right order now.
So I move to approve the application.
I'll
I'll
second it.
second that.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through, I'm in favor. Nina?
In favor.
Beth?
I thought they said 45.
In favor.
Ed?
Favor.
And Larry?
In favor.
Okay. Then it is approved. And you, my friend Larry, actually has a finding of facts to read.
I do. Shall I read it now, or you want to do it at the end? Want to do it now?
I guess we can do it at the end. That's
I mean, it's kind of a function of what everybody would like to do, so. Because I know we got kind of a bunch on the agenda here.
yeah, we have a big agenda, and it's probably better off getting this out of the way, getting that out of the way afterwards. The main
Okay.
thing is we will have to go into town hall sometime the end of this week and sign the copy.
Okay.
The members of the board. But
So I'll remind you,
we'll remind me at the end of the meeting, we will read finding.
I got it right here. I'm ready to go.
Well, okay,
But at the end, we'll do it at the end. Huh?
yes, we'll do it at the end.
All right, good.
Okay?
I don't need to be on for that, do I?
No, you don't.
Okay, thank you.
You just need to take it ultimately and go off and get it notarized
Notarized, okay,
and into the, the notarization happens, and then you'll take it and get it to
to the registry.
the registry of deeds.
Right.
Okay.
Werner, can you remind us what the timetable was last time and how we go forward? Like, do we have to go in tomorrow or the next day and get the
The
sign?
last time we went in both tomorrow, we went in on Thursday and Friday. because there
Let's
were
not do that again.
Well, I would say, well, it's up to.
Just wanted to
Werner,
know, when is it going to be available for Mr. Graham to pick up?
Oh, right, yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So if the board members come in, over Thursday and Friday, to sign it, then David, I think, the beginning of next week.
Okay.
It should be available for you to pick up then.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we can leave Mr. Graham there since the next item is item 200502, Carol and Kevin Regan. It's again Graham Associates, authorized agent. This is for a approval to demolish existing residence and rebuild in a different location to the greatest extent possible within property line setbacks, 9 Sunset Lane. And again, it's David Graham Associates, excuse me. So if you would present it again, I think.
I will share my screen. Okay, so as mentioned, my name is David Graham, representing Carol and Kevin Regan. This project is a very tight site. Existing house is located in a number of different setbacks and areas on the property, 75-foot setback as well as property line setbacks. In reviewing this early on with Werner, I looked at options. How could I feasibly relocate the house? The idea, the goal here is to tear the house down, raise it on piers to get it out of the future floodplain, and rebuild it. And looking at the site, there really was no practical option for relocating it to the greatest possible extent possible. So we essentially left it at its current location, and then took into effect the options for expansion of the 30% rule in accordance with the land use ordinance. The home will be occupied by the owners, and I've included in the package the floor plan and elevation drawings and the volume studies. I know there are a number of questions and board. There's been a barrage of emails in the past couple days, so I'm happy to take this through the process and answer any additional questions or go through the formulas for how I came to the came through on the 30% volume expansion. And I went through this with Werner yesterday, and I'm happy to show you my methods. I don't know how it will come across on Zoom, but I'll do the best I can.
Okay, the problem that I have, and I was talking to Werner today, and he says you'll somehow miraculously clear it up for me, is that on item 9 on your application, you very nicely break the interior square footage into the non-conforming and conforming pieces and show that the conforming is, I'm sorry, the non-conforming is under the 30%.
Correct.
You do not do the same on the volume. And since
on the application, that's correct. Further, and I will take you through how I've calculated the volume. But so what I included in the package was a 3-dimensional image model, computer model image of existing home volume. And the complicated part of this project is we have areas that are conforming and areas that are non-conforming. And in this view, I cut away the area that is conforming and only focused on the areas that are non-conforming. Now, the blue represents the covered porch. That is not included as described in the calculations in the ordinance of how to calculate the volume of the house. This blue area is not included in the volume of non-conforming portions of the existing home, which I have at 14,564 cubic feet. And what I'd like to do is show you my methods for how
okay. So now you further confuse me. So the numbers on item number 10 are total garbage then?
Item number 10 on the application?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Because what it currently says is the number you just gave me as the non-conforming, it just gives me that as the existing.
Right. That's where I think in my confusion in the application, I did not distinguish the difference between existing non-conforming and existing conforming.
Okay. What are those two numbers that you're looking at?
This volume is the existing non-conforming volume.
That's the existing non-conforming.
Correct. And this is the volume, adding the 30% of this non-conforming volume yields the 18,506.
Okay.
The whole house has more volume, but there's a section that's conforming, and I did not include that.
Okay, that's what it's, so, but whereas you did on item 9. That's just
right. I think the last
by not having the addition of, so because I assumed that was everything.
Yeah, that was the confusing part, I think, in the handler application where it was a similar situation. So, and I apologize for that, but
okay. So just for curiosity, what is the conforming? Do you know the conforming volume?
I don't. I actually never calculate.
You only calculated the non-conforming.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, that answers my question.
Now, do you need me to go? I can happily go through how I got to the volume calculations if that's a question. I mean,
it really wasn't. What was the question is when I compared your total square feet, and I just inferred from the total square feet, I inferred
Oh,
that,
right.
that I was dealing with total number down below, and in that case, it would really be increasing by 37%,
Right.
35% is what
Right.
I
Right. So again, focusing strictly on the non-conforming area of the house and the future house, the proposed house.
Okay.
The non-conforming volume or the non-conforming area? I'm
Both.
confused.
I've done both. So in this particular case, I'm just pointing to the volume.
Yeah. So what would have been clearer if you just said existing non-conforming on everything and not bothered telling us what the conforming square footage was on item 9, then
Yeah,
none of us were confused.
I understand.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm,
Do you want me to stop sharing?
yeah, please. Okay, so at this point, I guess I'd like to, I've just taken the whole stage there, so any other planning board members wish to discuss this before we reopen our public hearing?
We can we talk about the letters that have been received? You just talked about there's been a barrage of emails. I know I got one letter. Can we say something about what the others might be?
We've gotten one letter twice, the same person, and I think any other barrages were by words of Mr. Gilliam. So
We had one ahead of last week's, not the last planning board meeting. That was 3 weeks ago. And then we've received one since then.
Yes, that's
I'm
correct.
worried that I've missed something.
No,
I'm sorry, I was copied on emails from neighbors expressing their positive reaction to the application. I assumed.
No, I haven't seen those.
we don't have those.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's good to know.
That was my barrage of emails, at least.
Okay.
We just got bad news.
The only one we got, which were the one from Mr. McMartin, and I'm sure that we will be hearing from him shortly, but I guess one thing I want to explain, since there was a couple of procedural questions in this letter, the way that the planning board works here in Kennebunkport is the first initial meeting is a meeting only of the board members and the presenter. And at that meeting, the result of that meeting is that we as a planning board agree that the application is complete, and then we schedule a public hearing for the next regular meeting usually, and that turns out to be 2 weeks later. So there is the first meeting on July 1st did not need a motion to continue a public hearing, since there was no public hearing. It was we just scheduled the public hearing for 2 weeks later. So that was an issue that came up in one of the letters. So that's not a problem. So I believe that the bulk of the rest of this letter relates to the 30%, and I believe that Mr. Graham has addressed it with the non-conforming in a way that is consistent with the land use ordinance. I don't know if you want to say any more on that, Werner.
No, I mean, I think you covered, as far as the procedural pieces, what's been a little bit different, for folks is just where we've been doing, this continuation of the public hearing piece. As a matter of, process, those folks who are direct abutters and those who are who own property within 200 feet, receive notice, as well as certified mailings go out, regarding, initial, a scheduled initial public hearing. We don't send out subsequent notices for continuations or things of that nature. There have been questions, in the past, what happens if folks don't receive, a certified, notice, something happens with the mail. It doesn't affect the status of the application if it's not received. I can tell you that, we send those out. It sometimes takes a while for us to get those cards. Everyone's familiar with the green cards, that you get with a certified mailing. Here as of late, it's been months, before we sometimes receive those cards back from applications. So, we follow our process for the notifications, but and we're also at the mercy of the U.S. Post Office.
If I could add to that, Warner, I think the letter also addresses that there was no roll call vote on the initial review. We did have a motion that the plan was complete and could go to a public hearing at that point. So that is all that's required basically after initial review. And also we send the notices to the same address that we send the initial notice to, and we send it by certified mail. But also the notice of public hearing is referenced in newspapers, and it's also referenced on the town website. So people have opportunity, even if they don't pick up their mail, to know when a public hearing is.
Correct.
Okay. Now, are there any other comments on the 9 Sunset Lane application?
Yeah, Tom, this is Ed.
Ed.
I think Nina and Werner, I heard say two different things, and I think it's my error, but do we as a town send out a notice to the abutters ahead of the public hearing? In other words, a
Yes.
second one?
Yes.
Yeah.
We do.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
You
this
get
letter is saying that he didn't receive it, I guess.
Process-wise, you get two notices. One, you get an initial letter that's not a certified, that's not certified. That's just a, we've received an application, located at such and such for, whatever the project is. And then, the second mailing that happens is the certified for the public hearing.
Oh, thanks for that. I didn't appreciate that nuance. Thank you both.
Yep.
Now, we're going to hear from this person in a minute, but Werner, do you want to say something in advance about the point that he raises in terms of our interpretation of the land use ordinance? In other words, this letter to me, as I read it, is saying that the 30% expansion is to be applied to an area or volume of the house that is in a section that is in violation of a setback. That is to say, the front setback is 20 feet. That section of the house can only be expanded by 30% of its current volume and its current square footage. You can't say, well, the back of the house is also in violation of a different setback, and I want to use that as part of my 30% in the front section. You can only apply it to that section of the house which is in violation of the setback. And that's what it seems like we haven't seen. I thought it was an interesting point. I didn't know if it was interpreting the land use ordinance as you understood it.
Well, it's certainly an interpretation. I think, what gets a little bit tricky is whenever you have a structure that has nonconformities essentially on all four sides of it. and 3 of which those sections are all connected. And so, I guess the question is, how narrowly do you parse the expansion to that exact particular location? And what is the expectation? Do you cut this thing into 10-foot increments and apply a 30% strictly to each one of those sections, or how exactly do you do it? And the ordinance is not that well, you all have read the ordinance. It is not that specific in terms of exactly where that expansion follows. For instance, if you have a building that's non-conforming, completely all along one side, and somebody comes in for let's say just a dormer expansion, well, do you parse the design such that you require that the dormer be spread out along the entire length of the building in that setback, or do you let the consolidation of the volume expansion in a portion of that area that's non-conforming? So, but again, the ordinance doesn't parse it out that specifically. I can tell you as a matter of practice, it's not been interpreted that way, over the course of, many 30%, expansions that have occurred. And, each property, needs to be looked at, with its own, under its own merits and under its own circumstances, as such.
I think that I hadn't looked at it that carefully before. I thought the paragraph in the letter, causes us to look at if any portion of the structure, then that portion of the structure shall not be expanded. It's when you get into this situation that you have multiple violations, if you will. Now, in the previous situation, the 45, the whole property was outside of a setback. So you really didn't have this. But now what's being questioned, and I'm interested in hearing the abutter speak, because I'm, be interested to see why. But he's pointing out that what you don't want to allow is to say, well, the back of the house is in violation, and I'm gonna shrink that area. I'm not saying that's what's done here, but I'm going to take the 30% expansion of that back, and I'm going to apply it to the front, and I'm going to end up having an enormous front on my house. And that's acceptable if you allow it to be apportioned. So are we saying here that this is something that's going to be uncharacteristic of the neighborhood, or are we just worried in general that the letter of the law isn't being observed? So I think that's going to be an important consideration.
Well, I think one of the considerations you need to take to that is that as you expand this volume, are you making the property less non-conforming or more non-conforming in terms of where the house is situated and what you're doing to it? If it improves the lot in terms of the existing floor plan and gets you better setbacks, especially from water lines, I would say that you're okay to go ahead and expand.
Right. But I think in this case, it's staying with the same footprint, though.
Right.
So there's no advantage or disadvantage. There's really just a situation that it's going to be a 2-story front on the house rather than a 1-story.
Yeah, and I think, Ed, in a different scenario where you had a building that that maybe violated the rear setback, was however was conforming on both of your side setbacks, but then violated the front setback. So picture that scenario. Okay. Yeah. So right. I think the argument may make maybe that argument makes sense for saying, okay, the back can be, that gets its 30%, by the portion that's in the back, and, the section in the front, it gets its 30%, for that section in the front. But that's not the situation with this structure here. You
Right.
have a nonconformity, that, you have this, that's on three sides of this,
Yeah.
of this building. And I'll go back to the point of saying that, the ordinance is not that specific, in terms of that it parses out, the specific, locations, within the building design. It doesn't micromanage the building design, to that extent, to where it dictates exactly where within that setback that 30% expansion, can go. It also would be a little different if we were just dealing with, if the 30% expansion was just limited to the water body setback and not to a property line setback,
No.
then it would be, again, it'd be a different scenario. But in Kennebunkport's ordinance, the nonconformity for setback all gets lumped into the same category, right? So you have property line setbacks and water body setback areas that are all put into the same, they're all put into the same category for limited expansion.
So Werner, you would say that the portion of the property that is inside of the 20-foot front setback that's in nonconformity right now, that area could be expanded by more than 30% if in fact net the property has not been expanded by more than 30% of its all total non-conforming areas.
What I'm saying is that those three areas are all, get aggregated. They're all put together because they're, at least in interpretations and practices, that I've seen, you have three, these three sides are contiguous. With each other. And so it doesn't, the ordinance doesn't direct that that you parse those areas out separately and treat them each separately. Now, if I had, if I was looking at a building that only had a setback nonconformity on one side of the building, then that's pretty clear, right? You would only do, you would only be subject to the 30% expansion limit for that one section. But then the common question, and I think this is what Mr. Graham's design reflects, is, well, how do you treat the rest of the building that is conforming?
Right.
So the rest of the building that's conforming, those portions are able to be expanded, to what is permissible within the zone. And in this case, and in this case, that's going to be, dictated by, your coverage and building height. And in this particular situation where, the center section of the house is conforming, then it's limited based on the height limit. I mean, the practical reality, now granted, it would, I think, provide you with a pretty ugly house, would be that, had the property owner decided, well, we're only going to expand the conforming section of the house. So, arguably you could have, you could have seen a design, that had an expansion up to the 30-foot height limit of the conforming portion of the house. And it wouldn't have been subject to a 30%, ruling or calculation or permitting requirement at all, because that would have been, it would not have been an expansion, of any of the non-conforming areas.
Well, that makes sense.
So,
I just think that where we're looking here,
Yep.
if we were only dealing with the front part of the house as being non-conforming, we would not be able to increase it from a 1-story to a 2-story home in the front.
You would, well, I don't.
That would be 100% volume increase.
I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't be saying that specifically, because you got to look at, what's within the setback.
No, that portion of the house though.
But if you were just dealing with if you were dealing with a single area of setback violation, that portion of the structure would be able to be expanded by 30% of the volume and area that's within the setback at that location.
Right.
And
And
so
here
that's
we're
what-
saying, actually, this abutter thinks that if we were able to slice and dice the plans a little differently, we would observe, based on his intuition and looking at the plans and seeing that it's quite a bit taller structure, he thinks that that area is being increased in volume and in an area substantially more than 30%, because other areas of the house are also outside of different setbacks and are not being expanded to their full extent.
If I could say too, some areas are actually being reduced.
Yes, absolutely. I think you'd have to be doing that if you're increasing one, because
Right.
net you're under 30.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm using the non-conforming first floor area, the 30% of that, to increase the second floor. So I'm parsing that up as well.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, that's not what the land use ordinance is worrying about. The language he's pointing to talks about you can expand that portion. Now, it doesn't say, and he's saying there's nowhere, and it doesn't say explicitly that you can aggregate these. And that's what we've done.
So if you have
And have apparently traditionally done.
Right. And I guess the question then is like, how do you define that portion? Right. So if you're going to get specific about it, and you have to say, all right, what does it mean by that portion? So, in this particular situation, well, that portion is 3 sides of the building. That is the portion that is non-conforming due to setback. It's, we're not dealing with one particular section.
Right, it isn't each portion isn't associated with each setback. It's if you have a portion that is in violation of a setback, it's one of the areas that you're worried about. There's only one area.
That's right. There's
It's
one area. It's
the
the
area
portion
that is outside of any of the
That's right.
lot lines or 75-foot lines. All right, this helped me. I'm sorry if I've been long-winded, but it was an interesting letter. So I'll be interested in hearing from your butter.
Okay. Do we have any more comments or questions from the board?
So, Werner, question, as I'm looking at this, there are portions of the house which violate both the 20-foot setback and the 75-foot setback.
And the 15.
And the 15. And the restrictions for each of those setbacks in reconstructing are the same.
Yes.
Is that correct?
The portion of the house, what I just took away is that portion of the house that the land use ordinance is referring to when it says that portion, is that portion of the house which is outside of a lot line or setback, regardless of which one.
So it's the little triangle or whatever in the middle that is,
Yeah,
that has no setback problems, right?
that's a conforming section, correct?
And no constraint on its expansion other than the elevation.
Correct.
Correct.
Again, it's tricky whenever you have whenever you have a house that's, that's partial, yeah, again, Langsford Road was a much simpler exercise. The whole thing is non-conforming, and so the calcs are a lot easier to figure out. I mean, so it's a tricky one. Yep.
Is there I could understand if it's a house being an existing home that's being a portion of that home's being renovated, but this is a complete tear down and removal. Not that that matters, but essentially the way I approached it is to take the combination of those non-conforming areas and just mold them into a nicer design, essentially. I mean, if that's the approach that I took.
Understood.
But so in conclusion, what I think I heard is that the 30% expansion applies to the area of the building that is in any or all of the setbacks, right? So,
That's what I heard too, Larry.
yeah, okay. So I mean, that makes it kind of simple, I think.
Well, at least for for figuring out the math.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we're doing the comps. Yeah.
in terms of figuring out the math in terms of what you have to work with, that's what you have to work with. And again, that the ordinance isn't specific in terms of, if you're going to hang your hat on, what is, how do you interpret that portion, right? Like, is it that portion only that's in the side setback, only in the front, or only in the 75? And, again, the ordinance doesn't, it's not that specific, that gives you that specific of direction that says that, exactly how you're to do it, except to say that it's the portion, that is non-conforming, which in this case, again, you have, 3 significant sides that are non-conforming.
Well, so my interpretation of that is that any portion that's in violation of any of the setbacks is, that's the restricted area that can be enlarged by only 30%. So if you had a portion of the house that violates all 3, 15, 20, and 75, whichever portion of the house, I guess, is bigger or smaller, whichever one is most restricted, that's where the 30% goes, right?
Well, not necessarily, in this case here, again, it doesn't, it's not that specific, in terms of saying, I think, what I'm saying is that when it says that portion of the structure, so in this case, you've got 3 sides of the house that are that portion.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't, the ordinance doesn't, you don't have a performance standard that says, that you segregate it, that you have a situation like this where you segregate it out specifically into the specifics, the specifics of each area.
What's important
In this instance,
to me too is to recognize that by increasing the volume of the portion of the house that's over a particular setback, you are not, in fact, increasing the nonconformance, as long as that foundation is in the same place.
In this case, yes, because they're keeping the same footprint.
Right.
Exactly right. So I think there's an argument that some might try to make that says, oh, you made a bigger structure that's over the setback. But in fact, by definition, it's only
Setbacks
measured in
aren't
terms
changing.
of whether it's some portion of it is over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's expansions on non-conforming buildings, the ones that we deal with, majority wise, all live within this exception language, and I think that's, what I call the big language that's in the front that says you can't expand a non-conforming building, you can't expand a non-conforming structure unless you get a variance. That's where, that's how the ordinance starts off, and then it gives you this exception, and the exception, that's where, and that's where we're living, we're living in that, in the 30%, in that 30% exception area. And, we're just taking this and coupling it with the, with the reconstruction provisions as well.
Okay. So I think I believe I've heard from everybody that of the board members that wants to talk. Am I correct at this point? That being said, I'm going to reopen the the public hearing on this item for 9 Sunset Lane, and would like to know if anyone is raising their hand to be recognized.
Aren't we opening this for the first time?
This is the second time. We would all like to hear from Mr. McMartin. That would be very good. Thank you.
So I think I've unmuted. Okay, thank you. One thing before we go back to what you've just been talking about, I would, in following the notice discussion we had, we only received one letter, and it was in advance of the initial hearing. We never received another letter. The first letter we received was, I believe it was certified. But we only got one, just so you know. You know, I'm here, we worked through it, but that letter, I don't know what the procedure was, but we only received one. And as I understood your discussion, 2 should have gone out. Maybe I misunderstood that, but that's what I understood.
Well, it wasn't a matter, if I can interject here, it wasn't a matter of whether it went out or not. I spoke to the administrative assistant for the code office when you indicated that you had not received it. And she had sent out by certified mail the notice of the public hearing. And she sent it to the same address that she sent the notice of the initial hearing.
Do you know what the date on that notice was?
Which one? The first one?
The second one.
The second one? No, I don't know what date she sent it out. She could probably tell you. I believe she had a discussion with you.
Right, but she didn't, but when we had the discussion, we didn't talk about that. Although I told her this problem.
Okay.
But anyway, be that as it may. I guess you guys have had an extended discussion about the issue I raised in my letter. And I think what I would say in response is that I think you've got to read the ordinance in its entirety, or you can't pick and choose parts. And I understand that if you have a non-conforming structure, if you're going to make it larger, you've got to live within the 30% provisions of Article 8. And Article 8, and you've all talked about it, but I think it bears repeating, says that if any portion of a structure is less than the required setback from a lot line, normal high water line, and I'll drop the rest, it says that portion of the structure shall not be expanded as measured in floor area by more than 30% or more. Now, taken by itself, that's, you know, you guys have discussed it, but that 30% restriction is reiterated in other places in that article. And I think what that's telling you is that however you're going to parse it, and I think each building is separate or is different, and you're going to look at how that building sits on that lot and how it encroaches on maybe more than one setback. And if you have that situation, I think the easy way to resolve it is you go from the intersection of the 2 setbacks it's encroaching on and go out to the lot corner. And then anything that falls on one side is in one setback, whatever falls in the other setback is in that setback. There's your 30%. And I think someone had expressed an interest as to why we even raised this. Well, we live in a sort of a little cottage area. Most of the structures are, well, if they're over 1.5 stories, they're generally set back from their lot lines. This is within the lot line, and it's going from what was a 1.5 story structure. Now you've got 2 stories and a roof, and that's staring you right in the face. And that's why I think your ordinance, although it may not have been interpreted that way in the past, I think speaks to a situation like that and says, hey, if you're going to increase an area that's in nonconformity, it should only be increased 30%. I go back to the provision in your ordinance. If it isn't permitted, you can't do it. And it doesn't talk about aggregating anywhere that I can find. So I think, although I understand the discussion that's been had, I don't think it's in the context of what that ordinance says, which is why I suggested maybe it might be a good idea to send it to town council. You know, he's the one that has more experience probably than most of us. So I would just make that point. The other points, I had not been able to read the volume calculation that Mr. Graham had put together. It seemed to me that the blue portion was part of it, but if it's not, it's not. And so that's that. I think basically there is one portion of the building that I think is squaring off and is including a portion that was not originally built upon within the building. That's something I just pointed out. You guys decide what to do with it. And it's in the vicinity of the porch and the original entrance when you came in the drive. If you look at the before and after, if you look at the survey, you'll see that that's been squared off and the steps moved out. I think steps are not treated as creating any rights because you can move them around. At least the ordinance says you can. But that's something I think you guys need to look at. I guess my biggest concern is with the size of the building as it sits so close to the lot line. It's going from a very shallow a shallow roof on a one-story building to a two-story with a very, it's peaked to the full 30 feet. And I think that's just an intrusion in the neighborhood. And I think to allow it is misreading the ordinance. And I won't take any more of your time, but I'll be happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Rick Martin?
This is Ed. Mr. McMartin, I just wanted to maybe reiterate, but just to clarify that if I understand your letter, you believe that there are multiple portions of the structure, 3 portions of the structure that are in violation of a setback. There's
correct.
And that based on the discussion that you just listened to us have before we enabled you, I've come away believing that there is one portion of the structure that is outside of the setback. All of them collectively are referred to by the language that says that if any portion of the structure, it doesn't say if any portion is less than the required of only one of the lot lines. It's saying if any portion is in violation of a setback, then it needs to be considered in this 30%. Your argument is no, each violation, each lot line has to have its own calculation. And what I've heard is that historically, that's never been done.
If your reading is accurate, then I think it would read, if any portion of a structure is less than the required setbacks. It doesn't say plural, it says singular. And that's why I came away with the conclusion I did.
I can see how it would allow that. But I think our experience.
I think if you're going to
precise.
If you're going to aggregate them, I think the ordinance has to allow you to aggregate them, and to do so, you need to change setback with respect to the setbacks.
Setback.
Because that's what you're talking about doing. You're talking about taking all the setbacks, taking that area or volume, and then increasing it 30%. And that's not what it says.
I understand. I think you're giving the quality of the language in the land use ordinance more credit than I've seen.
Well, I would argue that it's actually crafted that way for a reason. And the reason is your ordinance is pretty clear. You're not expanding grandfathered areas unless the ordinance specifically allows it. And unless the ordinance allows it, you don't do it. And what you're doing, I don't think the ordinance allows. And I would just say, if you disagree, let's have there's enough of a question there, have town council weigh in on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess, thank you for your discussion, Mr. McMartin. May I ask if there is anyone else who would like to be heard? Any other hand raisers of the public, the butters? No other hands raised. Okay. So I'm going to, I guess I'm going to close the public hearing at this point. And I want to talk to Werner for a second here on the subject of his recommendation of referring this question to town council. Do you think we need to get Amy's take on this?
Well, I think, for one, that's a question really for the board, because you're the ones here interpreting the ordinance, and at the end of the day, should a decision be appealed, it's not, in this particular venue, it's the decision of the planning board. Not my decision, not my interpretation. I can just give you, kind of the benefit of what we've seen, in the past, in past applications and past practice. Now process-wise for, to get an opinion from the town attorney, I can tell you that, that's a timely, that's a process that takes some time. And certainly, there's a cost that's associated with that. I don't have a line item, that just allows me to spend legal funds on the review of a planning board application. Ultimately, that's a cost then that gets put back to the applicant.
Well, Werner, I think, this question may come up again and again, and it might be worthwhile. It's not a complicated question for the town attorney. It's just a matter of interpretation of the ordinance. Are we able to aggregate, non-conforming structures if there are multiple setbacks? And I think it might be because we get so many of these now where people tend to start mansionizing houses, especially seems like on Langsford Road, that we might want to get an opinion on this so that the planning board would feel comfortable going forward.
Yeah, it's tricky when you're doing it in the context of an active application. It's one thing if the board is looking to educate themselves on an interpretation for future. It's another thing, in the context of an active application, so that's a little bit of the trickiness of the situation. Ultimately, again, I don't have authority to just say, yes, I'm going to call the town attorney and ask for that, because ultimately, I have to, speak up as to, who gets to foot the bill, for the conversation. But I'm happy to have that conversation with the town manager if the board, wants me to pursue that.
I think we'd be protecting the town. And again, to Nina's point, This is not going to go, this is going to, is something we're seeing more of. I know that that whole Goose Rocks area is like a little village. You can see this coming up again. You've got an abutter who's saying this house is out of character with the neighborhood. Now, the proposed house. And you're going to let them do that in violation of your own standards. Now, that isn't how we've been reading the standard, but I think he's proposed a valid reading of the standard, albeit one, Werner, that in your experience hasn't been used before. It seems like something we should spend an hour's or worth of money to ask the attorney to weigh in.
I would like to just speak up. I don't believe the house is out of character. No, I understand Ed's comment, but I don't believe it is out of character for what's gone on in Goose Rocks. And I believe the board in the past has probably aggregated. I don't know offhand of any projects that I had worked on and brought to the board, but I am firmly believe that based on what I see happen in Goose Rocks, that there has been aggregation.
Oh, I think that's what Werner's telling us too.
Yeah.
Looking at this particular lot, I see just what I would say is a fairly minuscule portion of the current building is compliant with the current laws. And what we're doing is are we stretching it? I don't know, but it strikes me as a perfect example to bring up with Amy to get the right answer of where are we in the statute, because it's it's a little on the funky side.
David, could I have clarification? The setbacks that are driving the nonconformity, the footprint of the new design is not changing. So the setbacks are exactly as they are, correct?
That's correct. There is some, the person, Alec, mentioned that there is a section where I did square off the corner of the building, but I squared off and reduced another corner of the building and pulled that portion further back from the violation to the water.
So it hasn't increased.
It hasn't increased the footprint. To answer your question, no, I have not increased.
It has not increased in nonconformity.
No, in fact, if you look at the property, there's a lot of impervious surface that's calculated as ground cover in this zone. And it's 46% of lot coverage, I think, currently, and we're proposing to reduce that.
So where you've increased the square footage and where you've increased the volume is by going up.
Correct. If you have an ordinance that allows for a 30% expansion of square footage,
you go to 30 feet.
Yeah, you have no place to go but up. Yeah.
And so you've gone up to, and as you mentioned in the hearing the other day, that you were very concerned about the height of the roof and keeping careful monitoring to be certain that you did not go over that volume.
That's correct.
And the ordinance allows you that 30% expansion.
That's correct.
Okay.
I think the question is the language of the ordinance allow the portion of the front side of the house to be expanded as much as it is? And were there not other sections of the house in violation of other setbacks, you wouldn't be able to make a two-story front end on that house. You'd be restricted to only increasing it by 30%.
A portion of the front of the house is not in violation, so I would be able to increase that up to the 30-foot height restriction.
Clearly.
It'd be a narrow.
I'm trying to come up with a simple way of phrasing this. I know I'm failing, but I think that the abutter has pointed out to us that in his interpretation, this design, the proposed design, front end loads the front end of the house, front end loads the expansion.
But I don't know by how much.
Correct, but by more than 30%, because other sections are done by less than 30%, and net you're at 30.
Right.
That's all. And he's looking for a lower profile. That's all.
Well, the house is still going to be as tall as it's going to be because that center section is permitted to go up to 30 feet.
Point taken.
So it's not going to get any lower.
So it may be, a Pyrrhic victory, even if, but we've taken this as a sort of a comeuppance to say, have we really looked at the nuances of this land use ordinance, and isn't this an opportunity to, I don't know what an hour Amy's time costs, but spend that money and clarify this issue that for once and all.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever had a resolution for a question
Take an hour.
less than an hour.
Right.
An hour and a half.
Because here's the, so I guess, if the expectation, from the board is that you're looking for an interpretation, okay? So there's a difference between having a conversation about a section of ordinance, that falls within that scope of, an hour and a half. Now, it's a little bit of a different animal if you're looking for, an opinion that comes back to you in writing. I will tell you that is not an hour and a half conversation. That is that's a multi-hour conversation, review of an application, review of precedent. So it's significantly more extensive. Let me put it that way. So, and again, I'm not opposed to to bringing that forward. If that's if that's a request of the board. I just have the logistics of figuring out how to make that happen.
Can this question be asked of Amy separately from this application? Because we have an interpretation of the ordinance language that's a little bit ambiguous. And I agree, a written opinion is going to take at least a day's worth of our time. So. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a couple of ways that you could, that you could deal with this. Is that you could deal with, the interpretation in the general, outside of a specific, application. You could do it, you could do it that way, and not, and not let it bind your decision-making process here. I mean, we can make a decision on precedent that the board has gone through before, but I think it's still worth, having Amy clarify the language.
Well, that was my thought, that there's a body of precedent that supports the current solution, right? And maybe all we're asking for is codification of that precedent into clarification of the language. I don't know, in the LUO. Would that resolve it?
I'm even wondering if we could make some grammatical changes to the LUO based on the precedent that we followed for years.
Well, exactly.
Well, and I'll certainly offer up to the board, that, and this is a thought, that as a board you all could, you could have a separate workshop discussion on this, on this particular scenario, absent any particular application, to kind of go through the what if scenarios, to see what what you may, where your decisions might fall. That would be outside of a specific application. But otherwise it's your all's interpretation of how the current ordinance language reads, as it relates to setback. And again, I'll reiterate that it speaks it speaks generally, and and I think ordinances are often written that way,
Okay.
to leave room for for boards to be able to interpret those situations. If I had an ordinance that had to address every specific type of situation, You know, we'd be beyond, you know, the couple hundred pages that we have here, and, you know, we'd be significantly thicker. You know, if we had an ordinance that addressed, you know, every particular situation. So I think in some ways, you know, the authors, you know, over time have left things, you know, not necessarily purposefully vague, but recognizing that you do have situations that come up in which you're going to have to make an interpretation.
Yeah. And you can argue that in the spirit of following the nonconformance statute, that you can aggregate those portions that, you know, if it's 2 or more setbacks, to make a reasonable house that, you know, doesn't really affect the neighborhood in any more way of nonconformance. I'm not sure I said that right, but.
As soon as you start putting the word reasonable in the land use ordinance, then we're really in trouble.
We'd be in real trouble, yeah.
Yeah,
well, you actually have that language in the reconstruction, you know, in the reconstruction piece of your ordinance. It
as well as possible, you know, language like that, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's right.
To the greatest extent possible.
Right. It clearly gives the board, you know, some deference to looking at a situation and, you know, making some judgment calls. You know, I mean, we've seen that. Well, you know, I can think of 3 properties, you know, that we've had in town, you know, two of which recently, and then one of which has been in the past, you know, before any of you all were on the board, where, you know, under that reconstruction question, you say, all right, you know, we're going to let this person rebuild this house. So recognizing that there's not really a great building envelope, which setback do we prefer they violate more than the other? Is it the water body setbacks that we try to make sure that these reconstructions are further set back from, or is it the property line setback? You know, and so we've, you know, I think gone through that exercise, you know, with a number of different buildings, you know, and that's where I think this board and past boards have exercised discretion in saying that, well, as long as we're not making this, you know, as long as we're not bringing this thing any more forward on relative to property line setbacks, then we really prefer to try to get, you know, that water body setback as compliant as we can, you know, as we can get it. You know, given the circumstances of, you know, what you've looked at.
Yeah, I can go along with that. I think we've set precedent before in looking at these and aggregating, you know, which is the least worst scenario. So.
Right. Okay, I think we've, does anybody have anything more to say on this, or are we ready to vote? I don't know. Do we really want to go with Amy or not? I think we probably, it'd be nice.
I would like to have a workshop.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
It should be coupleless.
I agree. A workshop makes more sense.
Okay, so that being said, then I guess are we ready to?
So hang on. So we're gonna, in this particular application, we're gonna rely on existing precedent.
Correct.
This is for approval. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So
Okay.
shall I move that to approve the application?
Did you just move to? I'm sorry.
I did. Yes. Yes.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Close the public hearing.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, we have to first close the, I think I did close the public hearing. But
Yeah.
in case I did, I'll do it again. But no, I'm pretty sure it's closed.
Yeah.
So now, I will accept Larry's motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, So I'm going to go down the list again, and I am in favor. Nina,
In favor.
Scott,
In favor.
Ed,
In favor?
Larry.
In favor?
Okay. So in terms of the finding of facts, George, what you just sent out was just about there, but I think we need to clarify that the numbers are the non-conforming 20%. So that one sentence needs to get a little work on it. But
I added in, well, in the background, I added in non-conforming to that sentence for the volume.
yeah, well, I don't think it will
I
hurt
think
to
also needs,
just read the thing at the next meeting, but
I'd like to see it one more time. I think it needs to have the addition of the side setback non-conformance added to it as well.
yeah, and maybe a little in the description in the area of the excuse me, what's going on? Anyway, there's the silt fence needs to go sort of in the tail end of it. Just mention that there's a silt fence been proposed, and that would be a good thing to just put in that we agree on with that. So that being said, Mr. Graham, we'll read the finding of facts at the next meeting.
Okay.
And then
And those wouldn't be signed until following some time after that, so I can take those.
Well, after the meeting, yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So
Sorry to be such a curveball.
yes. Okay. So the next item, I haven't lost my agenda by now, which I of course have. The next item is item 200601, Michael Spinard and Brian Glazier, Kennebunk River Associates, authorized agent. So if we can bring, this is a first public hearing, and so for approval to demolish existing residence and rebuild in a different location, number 35, Langsford Road. So if you could bring Mr. Bedell front for us. And there he is. Okay, so if Mr. Bedell can give us another brief discussion. I presume you'll want to promote your screen also.
Yeah, I'm gonna find my screen sharing thing here in a minute. Or maybe not. So what we have here is a residence at 35 Langsford Road, which is a basic wood frame structure, which on the left-hand side is non-conforming in what used to be a garage area. And what we're proposing to do is tear down the existing structure, make it less non-conforming, and then also use the 30% expansion rule to increase the volume of the existing property. And in doing what we're doing, we've basically taken the home, and although we can't make it less non-conforming to the 75-foot high water setback, we did make it now conform to all of the building to the property setbacks.
Okay, and you also eliminated the little whatever building in the back to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this lightly shaded area here is the existing building, this on the left-hand side, and the porch here and whatnot. That's all going to be removed. The other thing that's also being removed that I didn't mention is in the back portion of the property. There's an existing guest cottage and covered porch area here, which is over the right-hand property side, setback here. And much closer to the 75-foot setback from the high water.
So basically, the whole thing is still in the 75-foot setback.
Yeah, almost the entire project still, even though we're taking down this existing guest cottage, and we're going to be removing this entire wood frame structure here. The only portion of the project which is actually conforming to the setbacks is this tiny little portion right here. So that's the only portion of the new project which basically conforms to the current zoning.
Okay. All right. So I guess we can. You've got the numbers and everything in here, and it's.
I have a couple of questions on this.
Mm-hmm.
One, do you have somewhere on the plan where you show the silt fencing of the work you're going to be doing?
So we actually, that kind of came up during the last planning board meeting, and what I had done is on this new site plan that I had Lower Village go back and show the proposed silt fencing to be installed here. You can see it here along this back line and across this left property boundary here to make sure that none of the construction debris or runoff makes it to the resource.
Okay, I'd like to see that corrected survey filed. The other question I had on that was, you say that this is in a partial flood zone, but when I look on the maps, it looks like it's completely in a flood zone.
Right, I believe it is in a flood zone, and we did go back and forth with Warner with this to kind of set the elevations to where they need to be. And according to Warner, the new base flood elevations will be at 12.0 feet. So that's where we ended up. We left 1.3 foot to the bottom of the structure, and then another foot for the structure. So the first floor subfloor is now at 14.25 feet, which leaves 1.3 foot of freeboard above the base flood elevation.
Yeah.
Say that last part again.
So,
Right.
I'm sorry. So what we did is we worked back and forth with Warner, and we set so according to Warner in our notes, the new base flood elevation will be at 12.0 feet. And then we left an additional, instead of leaving just an additional 1 foot above that to the bottom side of the structure, we left 1.3 foot just to give us a little extra room. So that set our first floor subfloor at 14.25 feet, which is actually 2.3 foot above the base flood elevation.
Okay.
So, if I can just give, I'll give the planning board, I'll give you a little bit of the spiel that, that I usually wind up giving, applicants, whenever we kind of talk through this process. And I think, so, Mike, if you can leave your survey up, it's a great, this is a great example for folks to look at.
Can you see it, Warner?
Yeah, I can see it fine. So, so right now, you're looking at a plan. You see this, zone B, and you see this zone C that are on the map here. And so what you're actually looking at is you're looking at an interpretation of the current flood maps. Okay, and so that's the, that this is an interpretation of the old current Z-fold, paper maps, which, are not, they're not digitized. They're not meant to be brought into a digital world per se, but but surveyors in Lower Village, survey has been doing this for quite some time. They're able to do a pretty good job in terms of giving folks, an idea of, where those zone boundaries would fall on the face of the earth. And so in some cases, for zoning, purposes, you'll hear, flood maps being used as, as an exhibit, in a zoning map. So for instance, here in Kennebunkport, resource protection is the flood, is the floodplain, coastal floodplain. So, so these types of, lines, might wind up being used for kind of showing where an RP zone is. But what's really important here, and you can see these, the elevations that are shown on the plan here, is it's these spot grades that are the important. That's, on my side of the house, this is the important data, because it's the spot elevations that, when it comes time to build the house, that's what's going to be, that's what's going to be used for actually determining, whether or not you've got a property that's in the, that's in the floodplain, because it's all based off of elevation. And so that's, that's why these, these grade numbers are really important. Now, we are also, as you all know, we've been in this, this kind of nebulous world where, these 1983 and some revised in 1988 maps are the ones that are currently regulatory. And I believe I've seen 3 versions of revised floodplain maps come from FEMA over the course of the years, that have kind of stuttered and fallen, since, gosh, since about 2009. And so what we advise folks is that, you try to work off of the best available data that you have in terms of, figuring out flood risk. And so right now, what we have is as best available data is what you see that's shown on the town's GIS maps, which are the current, these are preliminary flood maps, so, and that's what folks have been, in many cases, the past previous applications you've been looking at, designers have been using these, the proposed maps, because if you're going to have a property owner that's going to invest, this time of, time and effort and funds into a project, you want to make sure that at the end of it, you've got a compliant house, whether that be 2 years from now or 5 years from now. And so that's what we've been working, with folks on is, even though this isn't, regulatory, the elevations, we want folks to have, we're trying to look with a crystal ball and guesstimate as best we can, what these, what the future flood elevations are going to be. So we're still in the midst of an appeal process with FEMA, where we had a number of locations in town where we've been appealing the elevations, and and when those are different, we advise folks that of what those are, but we still work off of these preliminary maps, and encourage folks to use those in the design of reconstructed homes that are in the floodplain. Now, granted, folks aren't required to use those preliminaries at this point, but I would say that 95% of the the projects that we've dealt with and the folks we've been talking to, have been proactive in using this best available data to get them to get their homes safely elevated out of the floodplain.
Okay, any more comments from the board?
I have one other question I want to just clarify, and a
please.
correction. You say there's a sewer easement on the property that's going to be relocated to a location that's agreed by the property owner in the town. So it is going to be relocated on the property.
So the easement, yeah, so the easement stands now where we're going to, I think you can see there's a sewer pump cover back in here and there's this 10-foot easement that kind of comes back. So I spoke with Chris Simeone after the last meeting, and basically the owners are going to take ownership of this pump, or actually give this pump back and buy a new one. And then we're going to relocate this pump and the connection, working with the town public works to figure out the best possible location for it.
Okay. The only other question I had was, I think you need to redo your front page because you have the owners at your address.
I'm sorry, where do you see that?
On the front page of your application, the owner's address is your address as well, I believe. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. You've got them at 35 Langsford Road. That's what it is. Are they living there now?
So they live there basically part-time. I don't believe it's their permanent residence. But I can change that to be whatever their permanent residence is, if that needs to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so you can bring down your screen now, Mr. Vidal. Okay, any other comments from the board before I open up the initial public hearing?
Well, this is Larry, I just wanted to say I appreciate the efforts of Warner and the applicant to consider the impact of the floodplain on the elevations that you're proposing for the house. This is not a simple topic, and there's, like Warner said, there's a bunch of information out there that could be considered, but I just appreciate you trying to adjust the elevations to, for the long term, for the benefit of the owner.
Okay. So let me open up the public hearing. Are there anyone hanging out there waiting to be heard? They'll raise their hand. Please.
Yeah, this is Bruce Jordan again. Finally got on the right piece of property.
The right one, yeah.
Yeah, so we're right next door to Brian and Michael. And so my first question, I think you just answered, was, it looked to me when you say they're doing the best they can to situate the new property within the setback limits, but apparently some of that property is going to be not within the setback limits, correct? Did I hear that correctly or no? The new property, the new house.
So
it still has the 75-foot wetland setback.
Okay.
But other setbacks are no longer a problem.
All right. So I guess I would ask Michael, so the 15-foot setback to my property, which I'm right next door, that house is within that setback, correct?
So the home as it's situated, the new design will not encroach within the 15-foot setback on your side of the property line.
Okay, yeah. I had asked Brian if he wouldn't mind going out and just putting some stakes out there. It's hard to visualize if you're a layman, exactly where that piece of property, that new house is going to be. And like I said earlier, I don't have any issue with this. We don't. It's their property. They can do what they want. But, we just like to protect our property. So if it's inside that's, I got it. I still would like, and I'm going to talk to Brian about it, to just have him go out there.
Actually, he's the right guy to talk to.
Or, I don't know, if you're out there again, maybe you could, just to give us a sense of where that's going to be, just for our own benefit. That's all.
To protect us.
Yeah. And then the other thing that just came up when you talked about elevations. So is this correct that that new house is going to be 12 feet off the ground before the first floor starts? We saw something about concrete piers, 4 feet or something.
No, 4 feet.
Michael, if you could shed some light on that, or whoever, that'd be good.
So the new design as it stands, the new design, the first floor subfloor is going to be located at elevation 14.25 feet. And that elevation is that's referenced off of the grade elevations. So the current first floor sill is at 12.62 feet. So really the difference is about 1.5 feet higher for the new design. And the concrete piers are just to allow for flow through foundation for the flood.
Oh, okay. All right. Like I said, the layman doesn't understand all of that stuff. So I don't know if you know the answer to this question. My other question was, there are 2 large oak trees out between our properties. Do you know if talked about those being cut down? Do you know anything about that, or should I just ask Brian?
I do not know anything about those being cut down.
They're not in the print.
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll ask Brian or Mike about that. And then, yeah, you can talk. We're on. So go ahead.
Am I allowed to talk without raising my hand as a person that we're together, or do I have to raise my hand as well, Werner?
No, you can, who, just speak, say who's
My name is
speaking.
Kathy Jordan. I also have a house at 33 where we live together in the house, 33 Langford Road. Nina, I just want to say to you, thank you for recognizing the mentioning of Langsford Road. My family has lived there for 6 generations, and what I'm seeing happening is heartbreaking. I understand that you don't have any control over it, but thank you so much for recognizing that. That makes my heart happy.
It's not just Langsford Road, it's happening all over Kennebunkport. And I understand.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Nina, for recognizing it.
And the last thing we mentioned was the septic, but I guess we haven't. I mean, I know where their grinder pump is now. Are they staying with that, or is that old design, or is?
No, they have to pull that.
I know they have to pull it. What's the new design for septic? I have a grinder pump that's in the ground, and many of our neighbors have one on top of the ground because my house is newer. What's the new septic design?
I'm going to let Warner speak to that. To my knowledge, it's basically just removing this existing pump and replacing it in a new location, but I'm going to defer that question to Warner.
Sure. Yeah. I suspect what you'll have there will be similar in the sense that you'll have a pit, that'll have some type of a grinder, that'll have a grinder pump in it, that works, on a force main, no different than what you have there now. Now, I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like, in the sense, like, I know a lot of the older ones that you see up and down the road, are fairly obvious, in the sense that
Sure.
you've got a big cover over it. There are different designs and different products out there that are less obtrusive. That I don't know. I don't know what what the contractor is going to be proposing for a replacement.
But
Okay.
you don't approve that until you get that plan, right?
Well, that's something that would go through the sewer department. They would, the contractor would bring forward a proposal in terms of what specific pump they would want to use, and that's something that the town sewer department would have to approve of.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you answering my questions, and anything else I need to know, I'll talk to Michael and Brian about the trees and all that.
Okay, thank you. Now, is anyone else out there raising hands for? Okay, by all means. Sure.
Can't tell me these guys don't have the technology.
Mike, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. So I just wanted to answer Kathy and Bruce's question about the oak tree. Certainly our preference would be to keep it. And so if there's any way of doing that, then certainly that'll be the case. And I imagine that that's probably what they want as well. So our goal is to kind of preserve as much as we can. And, you know, I agree with them. There's a lot of changes on Langsford Road, and we hope that the house will be in keeping with what's there. And, you know, but we would like to be there full time, and that's our reason for doing this. And we'll do whatever we can to work with them going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, can I ask a question? Are any of those trees there tag trees of the town?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
All right, so if Mike is done, are there any other people raising their hands? All right, in that case. Okay, in keeping with our current technique, then I would ask for a motion to continue the public hearing till. Oh, no, Mr. Jordan is.
No, this is hard. I just wanted to respond to Mike. And Mike, we can, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm guessing you can. So we see you up there, we can talk about the trees. I have no issue with you. If you need to cut them down, I have no issue with that. So we'll see each other up there in the near future. So.
Okay, you guys can talk separately too. We don't.
Sure. Yeah, I know. I got it. All right, I got it.
Okay, so I will take a motion to continue the public hearing to the next meeting, which I guess is the 19th of August.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, well, I'm in favor now. Nina?
In favor.
Scott? Gotta get that pesky mute button going. Ed?
In favor.
Okay, Scott's in favor. Ed?
In favor.
Larry?
In favor.
Good, we're done. Okay, that brings us to, but hopefully will be not quite as long as the last ones, but here we go on item 200701, Tidemark Corporation, Chicks Museum, Chicks Marina, Eco Analysts Authorized Agent, initial review for approval to do a maintenance dredge. This dredge was approved previously, and it's 75 Ocean Ave. And I recognize, I presume someone from Eco Analysts will be coming up, Harold Brown, perhaps? If someone from Eco Analyst will raise their hand at least, so we can. Okay.
How about now?
Yeah.
This is my first time on Zoom, you guys, so you have to bear with me. I'm going to start my video. Can you see me there now?
We can indeed.
All right. Okay. And I'm going to do the share screen thing because you'll probably want to.
Identify yourself. I mean, I can see that I know who we are, but just identify yourself, Mr. Brown.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Bud Brown from Eco Analysts. I've been in front of you guys many, many times. And really all this is, I don't even know if we need to look at the plan. Simply the only thing that's changed is Chicks is not going to build the bulkhead. We are simply going to dredge.
Okay. I did notice a typo in your letter. The actual planning board meeting was March 15th, not March 5th of 2017.
Okay.
That's so. Why don't you give us a brief on the dredge? I mean, many of us were here on that board. But,
okay. Well, they're planning to dredge 1,800 cubic yards. The DEP permit is still in place, and it's good through this winter. The Army Corps' programmatic general permit is going to expire in October. And I've already been in conversation with Jay Clement at the Corps, and we simply need to get it reauthorized by just a letter. So it's really, and Chicks has already contracted with Proc Marine to do the work, and it will be done during the regular season from November to April, or the end of March.
Okay, and when it comes down to do the, Werner, for a quick question, when it comes time to do the actual dredge, you'll be able to verify that he has the proper Army Corps.
I will.
For you, before you.
Right, I'll submit the approval to Werner.
Okay, super. Okay. Well, now Scott Mahoney. Guess who was the case manager on this back in 2017?
I'm right across the street. That makes sense.
Yes. I don't know if you're, but anyway, yes.
I'd be happy to, Tom.
Okay. I don't know if we need more descriptions or anybody else wants to hear more about the dredging, but you had mentioned. Okay, that you're not going to do a piece of this that you had did before.
Right. The original approval was to build a bulkhead and upgrade the launch ramp, but that's not going to happen. It's simply going to dredge.
Simply a dredge. So, okay, and. So if there are no other questions, I guess we can declare this one complete.
Just a quick question. Same square footage being dredged, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. There were other dredging permits that we granted, and were those done up and down the river? Do you know?
Yeah, other, I'm going to have to think about it. On the other side of the river, I know that what used to be Reed's is now Danillo's. That was dredged and reconfigured. I have to go back in my memory bank.
Well, certainly the Proc people have been out there on the river recently, or like last year, I recall seeing them.
Yeah, Kennebunkport Marina did one the past couple of years.
Yeah, they're right next door, so.
Yeah.
Does that affect the amount of dredging you have to do, or is it less dredging, or no change?
Same amount.
It's the same. Okay.
All right. Well, can I have a motion?
May I ask a question also?
Oh, I'm sorry. Of course.
The DEP permit that is still in effect is, if you read it, it says the applicant is going to do dredge and they're going to build this sheet pile wall. We give our blessing. Is there any reason to think that these two things are coupled and that the DEP permit needs to be modified to say it's okay to do just the one?
Well, I received an email from Bob Green saying it was all right to proceed as proposed, as proposed.
That would be perfect. If we could add that to the materials that have been submitted, that's all we'd look for.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
All right, anyone else? Okay, well then, I would like a motion then, please.
Motion to approve this application
As complete.
as complete.
And second?
Second, Ms. Larry.
Oh, let's go through the list again. I'm in favor. Nina?
In favor.
Scott?
In favor.
Ed?
In favor?
Larry?
In favor.
Okay. So that brings us to the last item, which is also a repeat from the past. Unfortunately, it was Neil's. So we'll have to figure out a new stockee. But anyway, this is item 200702, Aaron and Emily Cooper, Walsh Engineering Authorized Agent, for approval to remove the existing stone seawall and replace it with a new stone revetment using 5-foot diameter boulders on the eastern property line. Work was previously approved by Planning Board on February 6, 2019, but never done. 165 Kings Highway, Goose Rocks. So, is Mr. Walsh there or someone from Mr. Walsh's shop? Could raise their hand. Okay. Okay, recognize Mr. Walsh, who is currently muted. There, okay. It is still muted.
There we go. How's that?
Good.
Hey, good.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you said, it's, or as Yogi Berra said, it's kind of like deja vu all over again. We did this back in 2019. It's a project, it's a revetment, an existing revetment on Goose Rocks Beach. And if I can share my screen, I can. If you can see this plan now, this is just to get everybody oriented. Dyke Road, Batson River, we're about halfway in between on this project, between the two of those. This project is kind of situated right in between this East Goose Rocks and West Goose Rocks. It happens to get, this area of the beach happens to get beat pretty hard by the right nor'easters, and has been quite a few times, and it was noticeable again this March when we had pretty good storm events. To give you a sense of this, this goes back to 2018, and you can see some of the rocks have been knocked down at that time, and actually some of them are actually hanging right on the edge here. Just a tad on that, you can see this ended up, we did a temporary repair on it at the time after this, but the owner held off on actually doing it. Aaron and Emily Cooper held off on actually doing the full-on revetment. But as I've had with a couple of different clients, as they were up here during the COVID, they found out what the March storms look like here. And having not been here, they realized that it probably makes a lot of sense to move forward with this. So we are planning simply to take the revetment, just to orient you. Kings Highway's up on the top of the page. Goose Rocks Beach is down at the bottom of the page. And this is the revetment. It's about 100 feet wide. And the idea will be to take, this will be constructed sort of piece by piece. We'll take apart pieces of the revetment and replace them with larger stones. What we have observed and figured out is that the stones that exist in there, back to this photo, as you can see, some of these are just too small. They really don't handle the force of the waves very well. And what we are also putting behind this will be a geotextile fabric that will help to mitigate any sand movement from and through the wall as the waves sort of beat against that wall. This is a permit by rule action. We do still have a permit by rule that is still valid from the original application that we did. So that one is in place. And I think with that, it stands pretty much as it did last time. Same idea, and they anticipate going ahead with this probably once we get into the late fall, early winter season. So be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions?
So this is Larry. So Mr. Walsh, thanks for making that presentation. So the whole idea is remove the existing rocks and then replace it with an improved stone seawall, essentially, right?
Yes, exactly. It is as many of the large stones that can be saved will be saved and reused and probably be the face stones, if you will. But what we really need are larger, more massive stones in that wall.
And I recall last time there was an issue about access. You were going to try to use some right of way between the two houses or something.
Yes.
Is this still okay?
Yes, there's an access a couple of houses down that we anticipate that we're going to be able to use for this. We have to work that through with the neighbors, but the owner's been in contact with them and is talking through that right now.
So all of the work will be done from the land side. You're not going to have a barge offshore.
No barge. Yep, all from land. Yep.
And so the original approval expired just because they didn't want to try to work through the winter or something? Or?
Yeah, they just decided not to do it, and we ended up recording the approval, but since the work was not done or the building permit not taken, then it expired.
Okay, so it's just no change, just, okay.
Exactly.
Repeat of the existing, okay, thank you.
Is the wall going to be steeper?
Not really, Nina. It's pretty much it's going to be pretty much the same as it is now. It's really just we can't go higher because it's in the sand dune. We have to keep it at the same elevation, and it's going to be about the same grade that it is now. Very slightly, just because of different rocks, but not by much.
So you're not moving back on the beach at all?
No.
Okay. Do you realize?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you realize your letter of authorization is only from one of the trustees, and this is actually a trust? So.
Yes, I think I can clarify that. I think we went through that last time. I will double check that item.
Yeah, because it's not actually an application of the people. It's an application of the trust.
Yep.
And you don't have the easements yet, right?
We do not have those easements yet. As in that it didn't happen. I think we didn't pursue those at the time. But the Coopers are there now, and I think they're actively talking to their neighbors.
So, Bill, are you going to use the original DEP letter?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, any more comments, questions for Bill?
No.
Okay. Then I will happily accept the motion.
I'll make a motion to reapprove this application
As complete.
as complete.
And I'll second that. So I will take, again, I vote yes. Nina,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Larry.
Yes.
Okay, now I just need somebody, since the last one was done by Neil, and he foolishly left the board, but anyway, if I need a someone to take this over as case manager.
Okay, I'll do it. That's Larry.
All right, Larry.
Looking for volunteers.
All right. So in that case, we are down to our item 6, other business, continued discussion of the codification changes.
And we still need to read the findings too from the very first item.
Yes, but do you want to do that after the codification or before?
Why don't we just do the codification, and anything that might vaguely be called a public hearing will be done. Okay. So basically, they're just basically renumbering stuff, and in a couple of cases they changed some time frames, I believe, to make them all consistent, and they managed to change the right in the wastewater department a few times, and changed to Department of Public Works, Director of Public Works instead of Highway Superintendent. So I personally think these are all just nuances that need to change in those two in the subdivision regs and the land use was the planning board description and the planning board rules and regs and the subdivision regulations were the two documents that were here. And the one thing that we noticed, and Ed and I were a little distressed by originally, they are updating what they sent. They sent us out the full codification of all of the details, not just the what's changed. And it did not have our modification from 2019 of the subreg to take care of the road acceptance policy. And I've had a statement from Arlene that she's going to get somebody to take care of that, and it's going to be fixed before the codification is official. So that had nothing actually to do with this particular set of changes. I guess officially, Werner, we have to have a public hearing on this topic, or we just all clerical. I mean,
this is your public hearing, that you're having. We have it identified on on your agenda as such.
Okay, so what we should do is then open and see if anybody is hanging on or wants to discuss the codification, I guess. And any board members have any other problems? Well,
will you do the board after that then?
Well, I might as well hear it now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I had a question about the seawall. I live at 168 Kings Highway.
Okay, that's for the next meeting. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting your meeting.
That's, no, the public hearing on the seawall discussion that we just had with Mr. Walsh will be
Yes, sir.
2 weeks from tonight.
Okay, thank you, sir. I
Okay.
apologize.
And
Thank
then,
you, sir.
no problem. It's easy to misunderstand things. So
Yes, sir.
please remember to call in 2 weeks from now.
Yes, sir, I will. Thank you very much, sir. And
Okay.
good night.
Good night. Okay. Well, I assume I still have no one else on public raising hands. Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing and just ask the board, I guess I'll move that the proposed changes given to us by Arlene are just fine, and that we'll move approval.
I'd like to open for questions from the board before you put that to a vote.
I didn't realize you had, I thought I had. Go ahead, ask it, I'm sorry.
I have 4 items that to me, appeared to be substantive. I'd like to understand them before we say go ahead and change them. I know the intent is for them not to be substantive, but I don't understand it. The first one is on the second page, and it's item D. It's 415.72D20. It's our subdivision regulations where it says you need to put an indication of the location, names, and present widths of existing roads and highways, spaces. Oh, I'm sorry, let me read it again. The location, names, and present widths of existing streets and highways, spaces on or adjacent to the subdivision, if any. And for some reason, this is suggesting that we delete the word spaces. In other words, we're not going to ask for the location, names, and present widths of existing spaces adjacent to the existing subdivisions. I don't understand why. I think it might be an error.
Yeah, bear with me. I'm just scrolling to that section of the codification there. So that was
415, of course.
415.
72D.
72D.
Item 20. And I'm at the same time, I'm looking at the existing subdivision reg. So between the two of us.
415.
It's application requirements under submissions.
D. And that was number
72D20.
20. Got it. Okay, yep. So it's asking for, on the plan, it's asking for it to state the location, names, and present widths of existing streets and highways on or adjacent to the subdivision, if any.
Right, whereas currently it's asking for spaces as well, not just streets and highways, but the names of spaces. I'm not sure what that means, but why are we deleting that? Because we don't know what it means, maybe?
Right, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what it means by spaces, in terms of.
I just thought it might be a park or something like that, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, that would show up as an abutting property, would be identified on a plan.
Okay.
But it's not, I would say that spaces isn't defined anywhere.
Yep. So you think it falls under the cleanup?
Correct.
Okay.
It's the recommendation to remove it.
The next one is just 2 down from that. It's section 415.81E and G. says it's amended to change the time from 45 days to 30 days. And it's the amount of time that the planning board is allowed to give the applicant notification of completion.
Yeah.
We're reducing it from 45 to 30.
And I know that some of these, some of these amendments that were, that are proposed in here are relative to making sure that we're consistent with statute. So as I recollect, some of these, some of the time changes occurred were relative to statute amendments. Not, I mean, that would be the only impetus to bring about those, those types of amendments.
All right, so you believe that's what's happening here?
That's correct. Yep, that's a statute amendment.
Good with that. Two down from that, section 415.81K. This is just a wording issue that I really do think is wrong. 415.81K.
So the language proposed language is such that it says if the board finds that all the criteria, the statute, and the standards of these regulations have been met, it shall approve the final plan. If the board finds that any of the criteria of the statute or the standards have not been met, the board shall either deny or approve with conditions to ensure that all of the criteria and standards will be met by the subdivision.
I think it just should say all of the criteria, because we've already said that it's criteria of the standards and the statute. The criteria refers to both of those.
So you're suggesting that it should just say criteria?
In the closure, it should say to ensure that all of the criteria will be met by the subdivision.
No, I don't agree. It states that if the board finds that any of the criteria of the statute or the standards of these regulations have not been met, then you ensure that the criteria and standards, and you're referring to the criteria of the statute and the standards of the regulation. That is correct.
So you're saying I'm reading it wrong to say that it's the criteria of the standards. I read it to say the criteria of the statute or the criteria of the standards.
No, it's not the standards. It's the standards of the regulations, criteria of the statute or the standards of the regulations.
My mistake. Good. I have one more. Why on 415.12.2?
Correct. Yeah, you're looking at the the site distance measurement.
We're changing from 4.5 feet above the pavement to 4.25 feet.
Right, and that's just being made consistent with the land use ordinance.
Ah.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
So anyone else have comment?
So this is Larry. So in this document, as we're going through it there, it's got this note, editor's note, amendment pending. Okay, amendment pending what? Approval of the document, or what does that mean?
That's correct. Right. It's what we're, so because parts of this are from your own, from your documents, from the planning board documents, It's not the town vote that approves, the amendments to the language. It's the planning board that approves the amendments that were specific to your own rules and procedures. And that's kind of what's combined in this document. It's the rules and procedures and the subdivision regs. And so, because the town voters don't approve those changes, it's up to you as the board to approve, just the planning board and the subdivision reg language changes. And then once you approve those, that pending piece goes away, and then then the entire document is what's brought forward then to the town voters.
Okay, so purposes of this document at this time, amendment pending approval of the planning board. That's what that means.
Well,
right. So once we approve it, it's good, right?
Yes.
And then it goes to the town vote, right?
Right, and just to be clear, you're not blessing the 250-page document.
Yeah.
You're only approving, the portions that were on that, on that 2-page document, I think is what it was, that, were specifically parsed out from your own rules and regs and the subdivision regs.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay.
So Tom, just as a point of clarification, we really can't approve these right now because we're pending the update that has been promised. Right?
We're approving this set of changes as being all right.
No, item 1 says it's okay as is.
Right, because you've already approved that document. You've already approved those, those changes. The street, and so that wouldn't have shown up. That wouldn't have shown up in a change that would have required your approval because it's part of the document that you already approved previously. We've passed that along to the codification folks. Tracy O'Rourke, the town clerk, and I went back and forth with this. Made sure that they have the correct document that had the red line changes that this board had changed. I think the confusion just happened is that we started the codification process and they started with one set of documents, and then in the middle of the process we changed our document and they didn't get a copy of that. So but that's since been rectified.
So you don't think it's going to change the numbering at all? Of these changes we're approving here?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, that's a good question. I don't suspect that it's going to change the numbering of it, but I'm also not going to promise you that it's not.
No, of course not. I just want to somehow put a wedge in here that says we think all of these changes that we've just gone through are good. Just subject to make sure we get the right revision.
Correct.
We can, why don't you move that, let's move approval that way then.
So moved.
Okay, well, let's get it worded correctly so that.
So we're talking specifically about updating the subdivision regs to the 2019 baseline version.
Correct.
Incorporating the 2019 subdivision regulations.
Yes.
So I move we accept the changes as we've just reviewed and their incorporation into the codification standards, subject to the update to the 2019 baseline of the subdivision regs.
Sounds like, I like that motion. So
please don't ask me to repeat it.
You can second it. Okay, somebody going to second that, please?
I'll second that. Sounds good.
Well, okay, so I'm in favor. Nina?
In favor.
Scott?
In favor.
Ed?
In favor.
Larry?
In favor.
All right. So a weird additional question, and you can ask Lisa about it in the morning. Do we have to sign the 2019 version of the document?
That's a good question. I mean, we do have a signature page, that's in your subdivision regs. To be honest with you, I don't know that I've ever seen a signed, an actual signed page of your subregs. I mean, I'll leave that up to you all. If you want to sign the signature
I
page.
was just thinking that if we need to sign it, it could be made available tomorrow or Friday, and we could sign it when we're
Sure.
done here.
Yeah,
But
no, I
if
mean,
it's not important, then I wouldn't bother with it. You're right, I've never seen a signed copy. I've only seen the names down there.
yeah, I suspect,
And
probably
it'll
years
probably go
past-
away in the codification, right?
right, exactly. That's going to go away in the codification anyway.
Forget I asked.
But-
All right. Well, I would like to move adjournment.
Well, not yet. We got to read some FOF.
Oh, we got to read an FOF. I'm
Well,
sorry. Let
plus,
me
before we leave the
read it quick. I
codification.
want you to read it as fast as humanly
Hey,
possible.
No.
Hang on. So I have a question on the codification issue. So we sort of conditionally approved it, contingent on updating the regulations to include the subdivision regulations of 2019. So does that mean we have to see this again, or does it just go to it's approved whenever those two documents get merged?
They can already remove the subject to, the subject to.
Right. I mean, arguably, you already approved the language from the 2019 to begin with. They just have to incorporate it into that larger 250-page document.
Okay.
What you all approved tonight was just that, the 2 pages of amendments, which were not affected by the 2019 amendments.
Got it.
So the next step on this is case closed. That's it.
That's it. So
Okay.
read away.
Yeah. Well,
Findings.
the next big step is that this entire document then goes to the voters for approval. And then I think the next big step after that is all of us kind of relearning the numbers.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah.
Then
But
once
I think what
I'm sorry, once
we've
it goes to
certainly
the voters,
seen, or what.
if we have to change the subreg again, does that have to go to the voters then?
No, I mean, it's, you do an approval, you do just kind of an overall approval with the voters, so that you have the most up-to-date, language here. But even within your subregs, it specifies in there that you as a board can make can vote approval of changes, or the voters of the town can vote changes into the subregs. It's unique in the sense that you kind of, there's some dual authorities there, over the document. But to answer your question, no. If there's amendments that get made, to the subreg portion of it, that does not then go to need to go back to the voters.
Okay, cool. All right. I recognize Mr. Simmons to read the finding of facts.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So this is the finding of facts on the application of Lauren Teal Handler regarding 45 Langsford Road, Cape Porpoise, Maine, 04046. Following site plan reviews pursuant to the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance held on the 1st of July 2020, 15th of July 2020, and the 5th of August 2020, and a public hearing held on the 15th of July 2020 and the 5th of August 2020. The Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following findings of fact and conclusions and renders the following decisions subject to the conditions enumerated below. Findings of fact are as follows. The owner of record is Lauren Teal Handler with a mailing address of 45 Langsford Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. The applicant is David Graham, Graham Architects, the applicant, with a mailing address of 59 Mills Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. The owner of record authorized applicant to act on her behalf in this matter. The property has a street address of 45 Langsford Road, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. The property is identified as map 21, block 11, lot 19 on the municipal tax assessor's maps. The property is located in the Cape Corpus West zone. On behalf of owner, the applicant demonstrated her legal interest in the property by providing a warranty deed for the property, recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, book 18034, comma, page 506, comma, on August 30th, 2019. Applicant provided a copy of the required MDEP permit by rule for the work. The property comprises approximately 0.37 acres, that's 11,907 square feet, per information provided by the applicant. The existing residential property consists of 4 separate buildings, namely a Cape Cod style house, a detached garage, a detached seasonal bunkhouse, and a detached shed. In an application dated May 6, 2020 and amended July 13, 2020, applicant proposes to construct a single-family residence on the footprint which would result upon rearrangement and consolidation of the 4 existing buildings to form a continuous structure across an existing sewer easement and bounded on the north by the footprint of the existing house and on the south by the footprint of the existing garage. For purposes of planning permission, applicant proposes to combine areas and volumes of the 4 buildings as the basis for sizing the proposed single-family residence. The existing Cape Cod style house originally was built in 1865 and therefore has grandfathered nonconformances which predate the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, which was first effective on March 6, 1972. These nonconformances are not affected by the changes proposed by the applicant. The size of the lot is 11,907 square feet and therefore is non-conforming. The existing residence and by extension 3 other structures on the property predate the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, which requires a lot area of 20,000 square feet. The footprint lot coverage of the 4 existing buildings, which will be removed from the site, is 2,770 square feet. That's 23.26% coverage, which exceeds the maximum coverage specified in the LUO of 20%. The footprint of the proposed new house, though not compliant, will be 2,765 square feet, which is 23.22% coverage, slightly smaller than existing buildings, which will be removed from the site. The setback of the house and garage on the property is non-conforming. The front setback of the buildings and of the replacement residence is below the minimum 20-foot required by the LUO. Nearly the entire property and all of the existing structures fall inside of the required 75-foot setback from the adjacent coastal wetlands. As allowed by section 8.3.b.1 of the LUO, applicant proposes to expand both the volume and interior square footage floor area of the new consolidated residence structure. Plans submitted with the application call for the floor area to be expanded from 3,036 square feet to 3,579 square feet, which is a 17.89% increase, and the volume from 28,509 cubic feet to 34,671 cubic feet, which is a 21.4% increase. The proposed expanded area and volume both remain within the maximum allowable expansion of 30% each. The current sewer easement on the property will be removed and sewer pump will be relocated prior to start of construction of the residence. Ownership of the sewer pump and of the associated sewer tank will transfer to owner as a consequence of this change. Applicant requested no submission or performance waivers from the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. Applicant will consider the impact of existing flood zones in establishing elevations of the foundation and floors of the residence. Pursuant to the requirements of Article 10.10.a of the Land Use Ordinance, guidelines for decisions, the Planning Board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes a negative ruling on one or more of the following identified findings which would otherwise compel denial. The proposed use meets the definition or specific requirements set forth in the land use ordinance that will be in compliance with applicable state or federal law. Finding yes, the proposed use will not create fire safety hazards and will provide adequate access to the site or to the buildings on the site for emergency vehicles. Finding yes. The proposed exterior lighting will not create hazards to motorists traveling on adjacent public streets and is adequate for the safety of occupants or users of the site and will not damage the value and diminish the usability of adjacent properties. Finding yes. The provisions for buffers and on-site landscaping provide for adequate protection to neighboring properties from detrimental features of the development. Finding yes. The proposed use will not have a significant detrimental impact on the use and peaceful enjoyment of abutting property as a result of noise, vibration, fumes, odor, dust, glare, or other cause. Finding yes. The provisions for vehicular loading and unloading and parking and for vehicular and pedestrian circulation on the site and onto adjacent public streets will not create hazards to safety. Finding yes. The proposed use will not have a significant detrimental effect on the value of the adjacent properties, which could be avoided by a reasonable modification of the plan. Finding yes. The design of the site will not result in significant flood hazards or flood damage and is in conformance with applicable flood hazard protection requirements. Finding yes. Adequate provision has been made for disposal of wastewater or solid waste and for the prevention of ground or surface water contamination. Finding a not applicable comment. No change to existing public water. Ownership of the sewer pump and the associated sewer tank will transfer to owner as a consequence of relocation of these provisions in order to accommodate placement of the new residents on the site. Adequate provision has been made to control erosion or sedimentation. Finding yes. Comment. Erosion control measures are addressed in the site plans. Adequate provision has been made to handle stormwater runoff or other drainage problems on the site. Finding yes. The proposed water supply will meet the demands of the proposed use or for fire protection purposes. Finding yes. Comments. This is on public water. Adequate provision has been made for the transportation, storage, and disposal of hazardous substances and materials as defined by state law. Finding not applicable. The proposed use will not have an adverse impact on significant scenic vistas or on significant wildlife habitat, which could be could be avoided by reasonable modification of the plan. Finding yes. The proposed use will not cause unreasonable highway or public road congestion. Finding yes. Existing off-site ways and traffic facilities can safely and conveniently accommodate the increased traffic generated by the development as far away from the development as the effects of the development can be traced with reasonable accuracy. Finding not applicable. Okay, then, when a proposed development will be located within the shoreland zone or resource protection zone, in addition to the requirements of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance, Article 10, the townwide regulations in Article 6, the performance standards for specific activities and land uses in Article 7, approval of the development will also require that the board makes positive findings based on the information presented that the proposed use will maintain safe and healthful conditions. Finding yes. Will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation of surface waters. Finding yes. Will adequately provide for the disposal of all wastewater. Finding yes. Will not have an adverse impact on spawning grounds, fish, aquatic life, bird, or other wildlife habitat. Finding yes. The comment, the applicant will include appropriate measures to minimize incidents of bird strikes on windows. Will conserve shore cover and visual as well as actual points of access to inland and coastal waters. Finding yes. Will protect archaeological and historic resources as designated in the comprehensive plan. Finding not applicable. Will avoid problems associated with floodplain development and use. Finding yes. Is in conformance with the performance standards set forth in section 5.6 erosion and sedimentation control of the Kennebunkport Land Use Ordinance. Finding yes. So any negative finding by the board means the application has been denied. The application is otherwise complete. Conclusions. Article 10.10.a of the Land Use Ordinance mandates that the planning board shall approve a site plan application unless it makes one or more identified findings that would otherwise compel denial. And as noted above, the board makes no such findings. Decision, the site plan application identified is hereby approved. Conditions of approval, if any, pursuant to Article 10.11 and 10.12.e. First, the applicant pursuant to 10.12.e shall notify the planning board prior to the transfer of rights to construct an approved project. The applicant must record a copy of this decision and provide proof of such recordation in the York County Registry of Deeds before any permits may issue or before any construction activity may commence. The applicant shall comply with all terms and conditions of the town of Kennebunkport ordinances as well as the main DEP approvals. And that's it, dated the 5th of August, 2020. So we can sign it tomorrow, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
I move we approve the finding of fact.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Nina seconded.
Okay, so I'm in favor. Nina,
Yes,
Scott,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Larry.
Yes.
Okay. Only one more thing to do.
Yeah, we'll have 2 copies of that here for folks to sign.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I move we,
motion to adjourn.
I second Nina's motion to adjourn in that case. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We are adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Dave.
you.
Oh.